Good morning. Welcome to UGC EPG Pathshala on Human Rights and Duties. My name is Professor Y.S.R. Murthy. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Human Rights Studies, OP Jindal Global University. In this paper on national mechanisms for protection and enforcement of human rights, let us take up the module on legal framework for the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities today. We have already seen the mechanisms for protection of human rights, namely the National Human Rights Commission, the State Human Rights Commissions, Human Rights Courts, and we have also seen the functioning of the National Commission for Women, National Commission for Minorities, Scheduled Castes, Scheduled Tribes, and in this vein, we will look at today the framework for the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. What are the learning outcomes? At the end of this module, you will have an understanding about the legislative framework and its background for the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities in India. You will also learn about case laws which have upheld such rights, and students will also be acquainted with the international legal framework and India's obligations regarding the rights of persons with disabilities. Now, if you see, persons with disabilities have been facing discrimination, exclusion, marginalization, as a result of which they are unable to enjoy the full range of their human rights on par with others. This affects their right to education, right to health care, right to livelihood, and so on and so forth. They face significant physical, mental, environmental, attitudinal, and other barriers in real life which forces them to live as second-class citizens. When you see how many of our public premises like schools, hospitals, banks, post offices are accessible to persons with disabilities, and is our transport system designed to take care of persons with special abilities? The answer is not fully. The movement around the protection of the rights of the physically and mentally specially abled persons has been a slow process where recognition of their rights in the public mind has been the biggest challenge. Nevertheless, the movement is finally emerging in the mainstream rights discourse, leading to the current terminology of specially abled persons or Divyangjan. In terms of numbers, if you see Census 2011 report, there are 2.68 crores of persons with disabilities who constitute nearly 2.21% of the population. Before 1946 or until 1990s, the perception of disabilities centered around charity or welfare. Now it is these persons were seen as unfortunate persons who must be given some appliances, who must be sympathized, who must be given some care so that they could lead normally, which is a flawed notion. So it is therefore important for us to understand the constitutional framework in the first place before analyzing certain key judicial judgments affecting the rights of specially abled persons in India. Thereafter, we will move on to the international conventions, declarations, etc., which place obligations on India. We will also see the legal regime governing the protection of the rights of specially abled persons. First, let us take up the constitutional framework regarding the protection of the rights of persons with disabilities. International human rights law is based on principles of equality, dignity, autonomy, and liberty. The Indian Constitution has also imbibed the spirit of these values. And if you look at the preamble to the Constitution, it clearly says to secure all its citizens justice, social, economic and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, equality of status and opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring dignity of the individual and unity and integrity of the nation. Article 14 of the Constitution says, it talks about equality and it guarantees equality for all the citizens before law and equal protection of law. Article 15 and 16 under Chapter 3 of the Indian Constitution prohibit discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. The formal recognition of discrimination on grounds of disabilities is relatively a recent development. If you look at laws enacted about 20 years back, they did not include disability in the list of prohibited heads of discrimination. For instance, Indian Constitution in Article 15 and 16 prohibits discrimination in matters of employment and access to public facilities on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, and place of birth. It is silent on disability. In fact, until 1995, the service rules prevented entry of persons with disabilities in higher grades of service. The rule gave the employer the authority to force premature retirement in public interest. Often employees who acquired disability during service were either forced out of the job or reduced in rank. The opportunity for their career enhancement was suspended forever. Even in the absence of formal recognition of disability-based discrimination, the Indian judiciary has been forthcoming in setting aside discriminatory rules in Nandakumar Narayana Rao Godmare versus State of Maharashtra and others. In this case, the Supreme Court directed that the candidate who was rejected because of color blindness should be appointed to any of the posts of agricultural class 2 service posts other than the 5 out of 35 posts which required perfect vision. Extra legal safeguards have now been provided in several jurisdictions. The Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities, Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act 1995 has an exclusive chapter titled Non-Discrimination. Sections 45, 46, 47 of this Act clearly enable quasi and judicial bodies and to efficiently dispose of cases of discrimination. It has now been replaced with the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. The Constitution of India envisages a very positive role of the state towards its disadvantaged citizens. Article 41 asserts that the state shall, within the limits of its economic capacity and development, make effective provision for securing the right to work, to education and to public assistance in case of unemployment, old age, sickness and disablement. However, the approach to disability in India has been motivated by charity and viewed as an individual issue. Even the governments rely heavily on charitable NGOs to secure basic rights like education, work, shelter and health for persons with disabilities. As a result, the entire process of development bypassed people with disabilities. A distinct self-advocacy movement of people with disability that started during 70s campaigned for protection and recognition of their human rights. It advocated enactment of a comprehensive legislation having a rights-based approach with special emphasis on social and economic rights. The government recognized the need for such a legislation in 1980. Since the legislative power regarding disability was kept on the state list, the matter could not be pursued. However, Article 253 of the Constitution of India enables the Parliament to override the federal jurisdiction of powers and to give effect to any treaty entered with foreign power or an international body, even if the matter of legislation relates to an entry in the state list. With the signing of the Proclamation of Equality and full participation of people with disabilities in the Asian Pacific region, the Persons with Disabilities Equal Opportunities Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act was enacted by the Parliament of India in 1995, and it has now been replaced by a Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. Now, what kind of interventions have been made by the Supreme Court or the High Courts? If you look at Indra Sani versus Union of India, the Apex Court examined the legality of reservation in favor of the disabled who are not clearly covered under Article 16 of the Constitution. The court pointed out that mere formal declaration of the right would not make unequals equal. To enable all persons to compete with each other on an equal plane, it is necessary to make positive measures to equip the disadvantaged and the handicapped to bring them at the level of the advantage. Article 14 and Article 16(1) no doubt would themselves permit such positive measures in favor of the disadvantaged to make real equality guaranteed by them. What are the disability-specific legislations? In fact, the 1995 Disabilities Act is a landmark achievement in the history of disability movement. And if you look at the objectives of this act, it in fact seeks to promote, ensure equality and full participation of persons with disabilities and protect and promote their economic and social rights. This act covers 7 disabilities, and the criteria for classification are medical and not based on social perception of disability. The Persons with Disabilities Act of 1995 is focused more on rights. The substantive provisions of the Act relate to prevention and early detection, education, employment, affirmative action, non-discrimination, barrier-free access, research and manpower development, institutions for persons with severe disabilities. The enforcement mechanisms envisaged in the Act include Central Coordination Committee at the national level and a State Coordination Committee at the state level. It also includes Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities at the national level and Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities at the state level. The critics of this 1995 Persons with Disability Act say that the Act lacks teeth and provides ample escape routes to the concerned government, as some of its sections which provide for something concrete and tangible for persons with disabilities is prefixed or qualified with the clause, the appropriate government and local authorities shall, within the limits of economic capacity and development. However, thanks to the Indian judiciary, this has been converted, which has converted a relatively weaker act into a stronger act through its forward-looking pronouncements. Now let us look at the 2016 Act. A bill to replace the 1995 PWD Act was introduced in the Parliament in the year 2014, and after due legislative process, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 has been passed by both the Houses of Parliament in the year 2016. India signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities 2006 and ratified it on 1st October 2007. This act seeks to give effect to various provisions in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. It has increased the number of recognized disabilities from 7 to 21. This includes, among others, disability due to acid attacks, thalassemia, hemophilia, muscular dystrophy, learning disabilities, and Parkinson's. Section 2C of the Act defines barrier as any including communication, cultural, economic, environmental, institutional, political, social, attitudinal or structural factors which hampers the full and effective participation of persons with disabilities in society. Section 2H further states that discrimination in relation to disability means any distinction, exclusion, restriction on the basis of disability which is the purpose or effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment or exercise on an equal basis with others of all human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil or any other field, and includes all forms of discrimination and denial of reasonable accommodation. Section 2.7 defines a person with disability as a person with long-term physical, mental, intellectual or sensory impairment which in interaction with other barriers hinders his full and effective participation in society equally with others. Section 2R of the Act defines person with benchmark disability as a person with not less than 40% of a specified disability. And if you look at section 31 of this Act, it stipulates that all government institutions of higher education and other higher education institutions receiving aid from the government shall reserve not less than 5% seats for persons with benchmark disabilities. And if you look at section 34(1) of the Act, it provides for 4% reservation in government jobs with 1% each in the categories of blindness and low vision, deaf and hard of hearing and locomotor disability including cerebral palsy, leprosy cured, dwarfism, acid attack victims and muscular dystrophy. 1% reservation has been provided in the categories of autism, intellectual disability, specific learning disability and mental illness or multiple disabilities arising from amongst persons mentioned above classes including deaf blindness in the post identity for each disabilities. Now let us look at the National Trust Act 1999. Persons with disabilities are not a homogeneous group. There is a great deal of heterogeneity and diversity amongst these groups. Certain groups among the disabled are more vulnerable than others. Therefore, the enactment of the National Trust for Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities Act 1999 aims to fulfill a common demand of families seeking a reliable arrangement for their severely disabled wards. The specific objectives of the Act include it mandates the creation of a local level committee comprising a district magistrate along with one representative from a registered organization and one person with a disability. The committee is vested with the authority to decide upon the applications of legal guardianship. This National Trust Act provides for the manner in which legal guardians are to be appointed, the conditions of eligibility, the order of eligible applicants, the disqualifications of applicants are all contained in Regulation 11 to 14. This Act lays down the duties of the guardian who has to furnish periodic returns to the LLC about the assets of the ward and their disposal in his hands. Similarly, the committee too is required to maintain inventory and annual accounts of the property and assets, claims and liabilities submitted by the local guardians to it. The overall supervision of this act is vested with a national trust board. The government has contributed rupees 100 crore to the National Trust Fund. The interest earned is used in supporting mandated activities. In short, the National Trust Act provided for appointment of guardians for those persons belonging to these four named categories of disabilities who need guardianship. The provision of guardianship is essentially intended to address the mismatch between intellectual and biological age of a person with intellectual disabilities. Besides, the National Trust created under this Act also implements or supports the implementation for the benefit of persons belonging to these four categories of disabilities. Now, let us look at Mental Health Act 2017. This Act in its preamble states that it seeks to provide for mental health care and services for mental illness and to protect, promote and fulfill the rights of such persons during delivery of mental health care and services and related matters. It further states that this legislation seeks to align and harmonize the existing laws with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities 2006, which India signed and ratified on 1st October 2007. Section 2S of the Act defines mental illness as a substantive disorder of thinking, mood, perception, orientation or memory that grossly impairs judgment, behavior, capacity to recognize reality or ability to meet the ordinary demands of life, mental conditions associated with the abuse of alcohol and drugs, but does not include mental retardation, which is a condition of arrested or incomplete development of mind of a person, especially characterized by subnormality of intelligence. The Mental Health Act decriminalizes suicide. Under Section 115(1) of this Act, any person who attempts to commit suicide shall be presumed, unless proved otherwise, to have severe stress and shall not be tried and punished under Section 309 of the Indian Penal Code. Section 115(2) outlines the duty of the government to provide care, treatment and rehabilitation to such a person to reduce the risk of recurrence of attempt to commit suicide. There are many other interesting provisions under the Mental Health Act for the care, treatment, rehabilitation of the persons with mental illness. Chapter 5 outlines rights of persons with mental illness. Section 18(1) of this Act asserts that every person shall have a right to access mental health care and treatment from mental health services run or funded by the appropriate government. Section 18(2) further adds that the right to access mental health care and treatment shall mean mental health services of affordable cost, of good quality, sufficient quantity, accessible geographically, without discrimination on the basis of gender, sex, sexual orientation, religion, culture, caste, social or political beliefs, class, disabilities or any other basis, and provided in a manner that is acceptable to persons with mental illness and their families and caregivers. Section 18(7) proclaims that persons with mental illness living below the poverty line, whether or not in possession of a BPL card or who are destitute or homeless, shall be given mental health treatment and services free of any charge and at no financial cost at all. Mental health establishment run or funded by the government and other mental health establishment designated by it. Under section 23(1) of this Act, a person with mental illness shall have the right to confidentiality in respect of his mental health care, treatment and physical health care. Section 24(1) of the Mental Health Act asserts that no photograph or any other information relating to a person with mental illness undergoing treatment at a mental health establishment shall be released to the media without the consent of the person with mental illness. Section 5(1) of the Mental Health Act states that every person who is not a minor shall have a right to make an advance directive in writing specifying the way the person wishes to be cared for and treated for a mental illness and who is his or her nominated representative. It is to be certified by a medical practitioner or registered with a mental health board. This Act outlines the procedure to be followed for admission, treatment and discharge of mentally ill persons. Electroconvulsive therapy shall not be performed on minors and for other persons with mental illness. It shall not be used without the use of muscle relaxants and anesthesia. A mentally ill person shall not be chained or subjected to seclusion or solitary confinement. Physical restraint is to be used only when necessary. The Supreme Court noted appalling conditions of the mentally ill persons detained in the jails of West Bengal in Sheila Barsey versus Union of India and observed that admittance of non-criminal mentally ill persons in jails is illegal and unconstitutional. The court ordered for discontinuing the practice of tying up the patients with iron chains and ordered drug treatment for them. The indifference of state and private authorities caused the tragic death of 26 inmates at Erawadi as they were tied to their beds on the night a fire broke out in August 2001. Following this ghastly tragedy, the National Human Rights Commission advised all the chief ministers to submit a certificate stating that no persons with mental illness are kept chained either in government or private institutions. Under Section 12 of the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993, the Commission is required to visit mental hospitals to study the living conditions of the inmates and make recommendations thereon. In pursuance, in 1997, the National Human Rights Commission took up a project on quality assurance in mental health institutions. It analyzed the conditions generally prevailing in government-run mental hospitals and departments. This project raised many important issues regarding the concerns and care of the mentally ill, particularly in institutional settings. The need for a comprehensive range of services in the community for persons with mental illness has been recognized. That mental hospitals in India are still being administered on the custodial model of care with prison-like structures, high walls, watchtowers, fenced wards and locked cells. And the percentage of involuntary admissions is high and the provisions of Section 19 permitting admission under certain special circumstances by a relative or a friend were widely abused. Since the release of that report in 1999, the National Human Rights Commission has been actively involved in the monitoring of several psychiatric hospitals throughout the country and ensuring that the rights of mentally ill in such institutions are protected. Besides the active involvement of the chairpersons, members and staff of NHRC, the special rapporteurs too have worked tirelessly, established regular dialogue with key functionaries in state governments and constantly sought change and improvement. The Commission also has come up with a publication called Mental Health Care and Human Rights in the year 2008. Now, let us turn our attention to the Rehabilitation Council of India Act of 1986. The Rehabilitation Council of India was set up by the government in 1986 to regulate and standardize training policies and programs for rehabilitation of persons with disabilities. The Government of India has adopted a comprehensive national policy on disability covering critical areas like education, employment, support services, access, social security. However, disability policy also needs to be comprehensively modified in the light of UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Somehow, this national policy is silent on civil and political rights of persons with disabilities. Unfortunately, most of the states in India do not have a state level disability policy in place. A few states are in the process of evolving such a policy. Chhattisgarh now has a state level policy on disability. Now, let us take up the international human rights instruments on disability. So, there are two types of norm. One is a binding and another is a non-binding. Persons with disabilities, like any other human being, are entitled to the full range of human rights. A range of concerns have been discussed in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is a binding hard law instruments, and there are a range of soft law or non-binding disability specific human rights instruments. There are a few examples of such soft law instruments. They include, among others, Declaration on the Rights of Mentally Retarded Persons in 1971 and Declaration on the Rights of Disabled Persons 1975 and the World Programme of Action 1981, Standard Rules 1993, Asian and Pacific Decade 1993 to 2002, Bivako Millennium Framework of 2003 to 2012, the International Labour Organization Discrimination in Employment and Occupation Convention 1958. And if you turn our attention to the hard law or a binding conventions on human rights at the international level, you look at there is a 2006 convention which was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly unanimously, and the General Assembly also adopted a optional protocol to this convention. This treaty, together with its optional protocol, was opened for signature in March 2007. It was ratified by India on 1st October 2007. This convention recognizes persons with disabilities as subjects having human rights and fundamental freedoms and not as objects needing mere medical care and social protection. It further spells out that disability is an evolving concept and that persons with disabilities are a part of human diversity and humanity. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is a legally binding instrument. The purpose of this convention is to protect, promote and ensure to persons with disabilities the full and effective enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms on an equal basis with others, and also to promote the respect for inherent dignity. Article 3 of this convention talks about a few general principles like respect for dignity, autonomy, freedom to make one's own choices, and independence of person. Talks about full non-discrimination and full and effective inclusion and participation in society, respect for difference, acceptance of persons with disabilities as a part of human diversity and humanity, equality of opportunity, accessibility, equality between men and women, respect for evolving capacity of children and their right to preserve their own identities, Article 5 of the CRPD provides for non-discrimination. It goes without saying that the CRPD makes it obligatory for the state parties to actively consult with and involve persons with disabilities in the decision making process, especially in respect of matters which affect their lives. The convention itself is informed and influenced by the expertise of lived experience of persons with disabilities. It comprises 50 articles. In conclusion, the persons with special abilities or Divyangjan must enjoy full range of their human rights on par with others. There should not be any barriers to their effective participation. The constitutional and international human rights provisions regarding persons with disabilities must be fully implemented. Thank you.